Hello, I'm Alice Baxter with BBC World News. Our top stories. China condemns the visit by the Japanese Prime Minister to a controversial shrine which honours Japan's war dead, including convicted war criminals. Police in Thailand clash with protesters as they try to stop political parties registering for elections. Regional leaders are heading to South Sudan to try to stop the fighting, which it's feared has already claimed thousands of lives. And what did this Las Vegas taxi driver find in the back of his cab, and what did he do with his surprise package? Very warm welcome to you. Now, the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has made a surprise visit to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo. Well, the shrine honours 2.5 million Japanese war dead, including convicted war criminals. Visits there by Japanese politicians have long been a point of friction with China and South Korea. The United States has said Japan's action will only exacerbate tensions with its neighbours. From Tokyo, Rupert Wingfield-Hayes explains why the shrine is so controversial.
It's fundamentally controversial because it has in it enshrined the spirits of many scores of Japanese war criminals, including 14 what are called Class A war criminals. These are the people who were convicted at the end of the Second World War by the Allies of carrying out a war of aggression against not just the United States, but against South Korea, the Korean Peninsula, the Chinese, Southeast Asia, committing many, many crimes during that war, many atrocities, many human rights abuses. Many of them were put to death. Now, they were, not their bodies, but their spirits were enshrined at the Yasukuni Shrine in the late 1970s, and ever since it has been a huge bone of contention for China, for South Korea and for other countries in the region. Senior Japanese politicians going to this shrine are essentially seen as condoning the behaviour of those wartime leaders.
And indeed, Rupert, no serving Prime Minister from Japan has actually visited the site since 2006, as I understand. So why has Shinzo Abe decided to do it?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons, potentially. One is this is something that his base in the ruling party, Mr. Abe's support in the ruling party, fundamentally comes from the nationalist right. This is something they have wanted to see for a very long time. Mr. Abe himself has wanted to go to this shrine for a very long time. So there are personal political reasons for doing this, but also I was just talking to a long-time observer of Japanese politics who said to me this is a shrewd political move. Mr. Abe is deliberately provoking China because it serves his political interests to have China angry, because he wants to push through lots of very difficult changes here in Japan, lots of controversial legislation, and to have a big, bad enemy in China, aggressive, threatening, certainly helps Mr. Abe's political agenda.
And indeed, internationally, the timing is awkward as well, isn't it, Rupert? This comes amid this simmering row between Japan and China, locked in dispute over these East China Sea islands that both claim.
That's right. I mean, relations between Japan and China perhaps couldn't get any worse. So from that point of view, this is going to upset China. We've seen it's upset China, but China is already so upset with Japan that perhaps it can't make it any worse. It's certainly going to upset the South Koreans as well. The same person I was talking to said, look, this is going to put relations with China in the deep freeze for months, maybe for the next year or so. We're not going to see any summit between Mr. Abe and his Chinese counterparts. Really, Chinese-Japanese relations are completely on hold now.
Rupert Wingfield-Hayes there for us. Now, Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has replaced half of his cabinet in a dramatic reshuffle. It comes as a corruption scandal throws his government into turmoil and threatens his 11-year grip on power. The reshuffle was triggered when 3 cabinet members resigned after their sons were arrested in an investigation into government contracts. Rikin Majithia reports.
It's a corruption scandal that's shaking the very core of the Turkish state. The Minister for the Economy, the Interior Minister, and the Environment Minister, they've all had to resign. The charge? That they, along with their sons, have been involved in a high-level fraud involving illicit money transfers to neighbouring Iran and bribes for construction projects. They've done nothing wrong, they insist. Minister Bayraktar goes further. In an interview with Turkish television, he blamed Prime Minister Erdogan himself for approving many of the construction projects. If he should resign, so should the Prime Minister. It would be for the good of the country, he argues. Not so, says the man who has ruled Turkey for over a decade. It's outside powers he blames for stirring up trouble.
We are facing an attack against the Turkish people and the Turkish Republic. Everybody's aware that this is not a corruption probe, but this is an obvious conspiracy, a setup against Turkish politics and people.
Foreign conspiracy or not, the government had been totally unaware of the police investigation into the alleged sleaze. Last week, dozens were arrested, including the sons of the ministers who resigned. $1 million was found in one of their homes. A further $4.5 million was found stuffed in shoeboxes in the home of Suleiman Aslan, the CEO of the state-run Halk Bank. This has all led to a new outpouring of anger on Turkey's streets. Resentment towards the government is still fresh from the huge street protests that gripped Istanbul last May. With local elections due in 3 months, this latest scandal may be the biggest threat to Mr. Erdogan's government yet. Rikin Majithia, BBC World.
OK, let's bring you some breaking news now, because there's been a report of a bomb attack on a bus in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. The head of the city's bomb squad told Egyptian media that at least 4 people had been injured. Well, this all comes a day after the Egyptian government declared the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organisation, a description that the Brotherhood has vehemently rejected. Now, moving on, Thailand's election commission has urged the government to delay the elections indefinitely there. This comes after hours of violent protests outside a sports stadium being used by the body for registration of candidates. The commission said it believed the risk of violence was now too high for election campaigning to take place. Protesters calling for the election to be stopped fired slingshots and homemade bombs at riot police guarding the stadium. Serena Chowdhury has more.
More clashes on the streets of Bangkok. These anti-government protesters are determined to disrupt